Good morning, everyone in Asia. Good evening to our friends in the US. Thank you for tuning in. On behalf of Manila House, this is Bambina Olivares, the Director of Programming, welcoming members and non members alike to today's webinar Bright Lights, Big City Being Filipino and Breaking into the US Entertainment Industry. The world of film promises fame, glamour, and wealth. It is often referred to as the dream factory, and Hollywood is its capital. Yet the reality behind the business of dreams is brutal and unforgiving, and definitely not for the faint of heart. It welcomes the talented but rewards the hardworking, steely, and determined, and more often than not, success in this industry is a result of timing and sheer luck. How do you conquer the odds stacked against a Filipino American performer, set designer, composer, costume designer, or producer even before you've gone to an audition? We have a star-studded cast for you today, aspiring and established actors, producers, costume and stage designers who will speak of their respective journeys in the field of entertainment and film. Let me introduce them to you. We have Victor Illyrio, a critically acclaimed actor and theater director specializing in text-based impact theater. With a track record of and passion for directing new works, his approach is Stanislavski, Hagen-based and influenced by years of training as an actor and working as a professional theater practitioner. Trained in Stanislavski, Meissner, and classical acting, or Lambda, his work explores heightened realism, epic theater, and post-dramatic expression of classical and contemporary text as a director. He earned a Master's of Arts in Directing from Britain's most prestigious conservatories, the Bristol Old Vic, where famed alumni include Oscar winner Olivia Colman, Miranda Richardson, Sir Patrick Stewart, and Daniel Day-Lewis. Giselle Tongi is an actor and advocate. She's primarily recognized for her acting in film, television, and theater in the Philippines, winning several awards and nominations for her work. She's passionate about advocating for women's reproductive rights, human rights, diversity, and inclusion in the Filipino community in the American media landscape. She's currently the executive director of Philam Arts, a 30-year-old nonprofit advocating for representation of Philam artists. Jet Tolentino is an award-winning producer, a three-time Tony Award and Grammy Award-winning Broadway producer who was born, raised, and educated in the Philippines. He's crossing over from theater to film. He wrote, produced, and directed his first film, a call to action for education short documentary, Life is What You Make It, which highlights his life from the slums in the Philippines to Broadway. He also wrote, produced, and co-directed Archipelago of Memory, a short documentary that interweaves his personal narrative as a U.S. immigrant with the fabric of Filipino diaspora and the Philippines' colonial and modern history. In 2014, Jet was recognized as one of the outstanding Filipinos in America at Carnegie Hall in New York City. He was presented the 2016 Ani ng Dangal or Harvest of Honor Award by the Philippine National Commission for Culture and the Arts for bringing international honor to the Philippines. Also in 2016, he was named as one of the outstanding young men and women of the Philippines. He represented the United States to the 5th Filipino Young Leaders Program immersion trip to the Philippines. Nacho Tanbunding is an actor, a mixed-race actor, singer, dancer, and artist. He originated the role of Felix Taro Jr. in Mayi Theater Company's Felix Taro, the first Filipino-American musical to premiere off-Broadway. Previously, Nacho was seen recurring on NBC's Rise as Francis Russo. Other TV credits include The Expanding Universe of Ashley Garcia, The First Wives Club, and Dickinson. Born and raised in Manila, Nacho began a career in the professional theater at the age of 10 with Repertory Philippines, juggling schoolwork with rehearsals and performances, appearing in productions like The Sound of Music, Peter Pan, Seussical, Alice in Wonderland, Jack and the Beanstalk, The Producers, and Camp Rock, to name a few. Nacho later moved to New York, where he attended NYU's Tisch School of the Arts and graduated with honors and a BFA in theater. Nacho is a member of both the SAG AFTRA and Actors Equity Association. Diane Phelan is an actor, director, producer, and activist. She's based in New York City, and she's the founder of hashtag Racism is a Virus campaign and Unapologetically Asian. Both aim to activate and empower Asian Americans and redefine what it means to be American right now. Both organizations have been featured in the New York Times, Reuters, Asia Journal, and Next Shark. She has performed in lead roles on Broadway as well as national and international productions, most notably in School of Rock, West Side Story, and King and I. She's the founder of the Broadway Diversity Project. You can catch her starring in the new film Mary Happy, streaming on Amazon Prime Video.com. Her current project is playing Sibella in the All Asian Gentleman's Guide Broadway benefit for Stop AAPI Hate, premiering on July 15th. Clint Ramos is designer, educator, activist, and producer. He is a recipient of a Tony Award for Best Costume Design of a Play. He's the first person of color to win in this category and has been nominated twice for his designs for Once on This Island and Torch Song. He has designed sets and or costumes for over 200 theater, opera, and dance productions. His film credits include design for Lingua Franca by Isabel Sandoval for Netflix, and his costume design for Respect, the Aretha Franklin biopic starring Jennifer Hudson for MGM, which will be on the big screen in the winter of this year. Clint is a producing creative director for Encores at New York City Center, is professor of design and head of design production at Fordham University, and he serves in the American Theater Wings he serves on the American Theater Wing's advisory committee. His lifelong advocacies for an equitable landscape in theater and film for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and for the rights of immigrants. Before we begin, just a few ground rules. This webinar is being recorded and will be up on the Manila House YouTube channel in a day or so. Please use the chat box and the Q&A box for any questions and comments, and we'll get to your questions as we go along. Thank you. When we speak of the entertainment industry, we often forget that there's a whole ecosystem involved in bringing a production to screen or stage, as the camera is often focused on the actors. But before we go to the actors in the panel, I'd like to start with the stars who make magic behind the scenes. So Clint, why don't you start and tell us your story?
Hi, everybody. Good evening to the people in the States and good morning to the people in Asia. Hi, I'm Clint Ramos. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm currently in Manhattan, New York, the unceded territory of the Mansi Lenape people. My story, I was born and raised in Cebu. Went to a Catholic school there. I went to college in Manila. And high school. I went to the Philippine Science High School, and I was there. I met this amazing drama teacher. His name was Chris Miliado. He became, I think he still is, the artistic director of the Cultural Center. But he introduced me to what at that time was political theater, and I fell in love with street theater. I kind of like didn't really pay attention to school, and I just I saw the power of performance, and I kind of that was my first encounter with theater, and I fell in love with it. I kind of was addicted to how it moved people, And this was during the 80s, and eventually I believe that what we had been doing on the streets actually contributed to the revolution in 86. And I came to the States because I wanted to practice what I had fallen in love with, and I had come and sort of like learned what I now call the oppressors techniques. I sort of just signed up, to practice sort of a commodified version of what I had fallen in love with, and I just did that, kind of like on the pavement doing that. I've been doing this for a long time. And my practice has kind of transformed. The last, I would say 5 to 7 years has really about kind of like really going back to my roots, figuring out who I am and why I do what I do and why it matters to me. And really, I gravitate towards projects that I love that move people in a way that makes their lives better. Um, I didn't really set out to be a designer. I wanted to be a director. I didn't have, sort of a plan, but I quickly realized that I didn't have that facility to sort of be there for actors and be there 100%, all the time. So I needed to go in and out, and designing was sort of the the best kind of iteration of that practice. I'm able to be really public and talk to people and then go back to my studio and be private and think about concepts and things. I fell in love with it because I get to create these worlds that otherwise I wouldn't necessarily visit if I was just not doing it. So I get to kind of fantasize and create these these places, these worlds, and what the inhabitants of that world looks like, and somebody gets to pay for it. And so right now I am respect the Aretha Franklin biopic is coming out actually in August, not this winter. And I go in and out of filming uh, and um, and theater. I'm currently working on the Whitney Houston biopic. I Want to Dance with Somebody. We're in prep for that, and a couple of musicals. I'm working on The Outsiders. A musical version of the S.E. Hinton book, on which that film was based on, with Rob Lowe and everybody, and and yeah, and I'm just busy sort of, causing good trouble in the American theater, trying to get them to do the things that they ought to be doing.
Thanks so much, Clint. Can I ask Jet now to maybe introduce himself as well and talk a little bit? And you all work together, right? You've also worked with Clint.
Yes, I've worked with Clint in two projects, I believe. Here Lies Love and Lingua Franca. Yeah, yeah. Um, Same with Clint. I grew up in the Philippines, Iloilo City, Barangay Kalumpang. Um, Born, raised, and educated there at University of Iloilo from high school to college. I have an accounting degree. Yes, I didn't go to school for any artistic challenges because back in the 90s, even tourism was not taught in Iloilo. So I was only trying to go to whatever was in my vicinity. And my scholarship then was only based in Iloilo, so I couldn't go to Cebu or to Manila. So I stuck with accounting, and I worked in Hong Kong in and out for 2 years to an American company inside fashion, and then JP Capital Finance, which was a Japanese finance company. I was an internal auditor there they had 80,000 clients. And that was sort of my entry to the United States. I moved to the US in 2002. I was trained in Oakland, California for The Good Guys. For those in the West Coast, I'm sure you're familiar with The Good Guys. It's the competitor of Best Buy. Unfortunately, that company folded up and was absorbed by Radio Shack. So I had to move to the East Coast and work in my field. And then that's where I was exposed to the theater. Well, I saw Lea Salonga's last performance in 2000 in Miss Saigon in the Philippines. That was my first theatrical experience. I had to fly overnight to Manila, coming from Iloilo. I just wanted to see it, and completely changed my life. And having an accounting background, I was already conceptualizing what would it be the expense like, what are the things to spend on. So I was already taking notes on the costume, where the lights are coming from, how many actors on stage, and all that stuff. So it took me to a place that I never thought I could go, and it was enhanced when I was going to the theater in New York. So as of to date, I have about 1,700 playbills in my collection. Yeah, that's a lot. And it culminated in 2009 when I started getting invitations from the Broadway people to go to their presentations, their workshops, and all that. And that was my exposure. And until I was, you know, I got into blogging, reviewed some of the shows that I saw. So that was my entryway to producing, to be honest with you. So again, I didn't go to school for producing and all that. My first team was with Broadway Records with Van Dean, and we did albums with how to succeed in business without really trying with Daniel Radcliffe, and then Darren Criss, and then Nick Jonas, who took all the franchise. I mean, eventually it's a cycle of this famous actors, and then and by 2018. I think the last Broadway show that I did was Huey with Oscar winner Forrest Whitaker. And I've been exposed to filmmaking, which I enjoy also because, in films, you only do it in a specific period of time, but the lifespan is limitless. And of course, the revenue stream is expansive. But how I take projects on helm is that a story that I've never heard of before. Of course, the representation is very important to me. Um, I'm very curious about who's in at the helm. Just a segue, that's when I departed with a famous producer back in 2019 when I thought something is wrong, and I changed the trajectory of my producing strategy, because I think I have to bring in my roots as well, just like what Clint said. And now I only take projects that's relevant to my roots. So, and I'm about to drop a press release next month. I can't say what project it is yet because it's controlled by my publicist, but hopefully it's a film, but it's gonna come out. The press release will be next month. So,
That's exciting, Jet. So new
yes,
directions for you too.
yes.
May I call in Victor? Victor, you want to tell us a little bit about how you got started? Thank you, Jet.
Hi guys. Good evening to those in New York and good morning to those in Manila. Um, well, I'm a Batangueño. My family is from Tanawan, Batangas. I was born there. I was born in Manila. I was about 11 when I came to America. Not too many people know this, but I actually started as a dancer. I was training at Academy of Ballet under Richard Gibson in San Francisco, and then I came to New York because I thought I was going to be the Asian Gene Kelly. I was so inspired by him, and then like anybody who pursues a life and a career in the theater and the performing arts, you do the rigmarole of auditioning and working and all that stuff. And I was training when I came here, working multiple jobs and auditioning, and then I was, because I'm very short, so I would make it to the very end, but wasn't getting the job. And then years passed, and I was ready to throw in the towel. And then I booked the first national tour of the '97 Broadway revival of The King and I. And I was like, oh, wow, I guess there is room or space for me in this world. And and then I did that for several months. It was a great gig. And then I was, when you're doing a show, long runs, all I did was read plays. and I wanted to expand on my artistic life. And I became very interested in dramatic literature. So I left a very, very good job on the road and came back to New York, studied Meisner with Ron Stetson. Viola Davis also trained with Ron Stetson. And then after that, I met a woman called Deborah Headwall, who up to this day is a great mentor of mine. And I've been exploring the works of Stanislavski and Uta Hagen. I've been very, very drawn ever since I've pursued dramatic literature. I've been very drawn to psychological realism. So that had been the form that I've been practicing for years. Very naturalistic, hyper-naturalistic kind of work. And then a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to explore the classical work. So I applied to many schools in the UK, and I got into Lambda. I did classical work there, trained immensely, particularly in Shakespeare and Jacobean. And I loved it. I was opened up to a whole new form of expression, very language driven. And then I loved it so much that when I came back to New York, I wanted to go back and pursue directing. And I had been directing, just forgive me, I because of lack of representation, people that looked like me, like all of us, that was lacking presence in mainstream theater. I started a theater company in 2005 called Diversity Theater Company. And it was great. We tackled themes of race and social politics, gender identity, economic diaspora, particularly in the Philippines, mature women and their generation. It was really fantastic. And due to some funding issues relating to the Madoff case, 70% of my funding that was coming from an individual, I didn't do a very good job in terms of governance, because I focused my work on the creative stuff, that I neglected the governance and the development and the fundraising and all that stuff. So we had 10 years of that. It was immensely fulfilling, but sadly it had a short run, but such is life. Then I went to the UK. I got into all the schools I applied to, and I decided to go to the Old Vic, where I was once again opened up to many, like more of a post-dramatic form of theater. And I was very fortunate to have been mentored by really terrific practitioners over there. And I worked with Sally Cookson. And just before the pandemic, I was hired to be on Tom Morris's directing team. Tom Morris was the creator and director of War Horse. And there was this new big theatrical event that was happening called Semmelweis, starring Mark Rylance. And I was on his directing team, and we were set to begin rehearsals in April and open in May up until August at Bristol Old Vic, and then transfer to London. And then the pandemic happened, and that was quite unfortunate. However, throughout the year, I was doing immense amount of digital theater, full production live streams, all out of the UK, virtual black box theater. I think I was the first one to do it in the UK, actually. And then I was living in London until November, and the lockdown 2.0 in the UK happened, and I packed up and came back here to be with my husband. I was to do a Bridge Project Manila edition this coming fall, a play called The Pride by Alexi K. Campbell, and the idea of it was to bridge global Filipino theater practitioners two great, terrific actors from the Royal Shakespeare Company and the Old Vic, James Cooney and James Bradwell, both Filipinos. We're gonna collaborate with Mencho Lauchenko and Janina Ocampo to do this at the Maybank Theater. It was going to be a global live stream, and then the pandemic in Manila happened a couple of months ago. So the temperature changed. So we're now trying to reschedule it. And then I'm going to wrap this up now. And recently I've just been advised that the Semmelweis project with Mark Rylance might be going up end of this year to open early next year. So I may quite possibly be heading back to the UK. So sorry for the tap dancing around it.
No, that's fine. Thanks. I mean, yeah, I guess we gotta look for silver linings, right?
Yeah,
So at
it's
least,
rough for all of
yeah,
us, for everybody here, you know.
yeah. Okay, so I just want to turn now to the two. Well, we have three actors here actually, but I want Diane to tell us a little bit more about how she got into the business here, and maybe share a bit about your journey.
Hi, everyone. I would love to. I'm loving seeing all these faces of artists I love and respect in this room. It's a pleasure to be here. And Victor, we haven't seen you since you've been away. You ran away to London and the UK.
Oh, insane.
I'm happy to see you here.
Likewise, you look as beautiful as ever.
Well, okay, a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Taipei. Different story than most people. My parents met there. I'm mixed race, half Filipino, half white. My mother's family is from Quezon Province. My father's family is from New Haven, Connecticut. Moved to New York. Moved to Connecticut when I was 9. New York for school. I went to NYU. Found out at a young age I loved to sing, so music and singing was my way into the business, and I found my way into community theater, then high school theater, then NYU, and from there I also got a different tour of The King and I, a non-equity tour that allowed me to play my first role and catapulted me into the business. Fast forward to many years later, I finally made my Broadway debut at a very late age. Like I'm talking 15 years after that first production in The King and I. And, that kind of just speaks to a little bit of, the need for more stories for Asian Americans, and kudos to everybody in this room who's part of the fight to make that happen. So, I've been on Broadway in The King and I and in School of Rock, and I did Here Lies Love, and was lucky to be costumed by Clint and produced by Jet. And I did Felix Star with Nacho, another exciting production off Broadway. But I had gotten very sick. I had Lyme disease. Living in Connecticut, you get bit by ticks. So I had this long-term illness. And when I was away, I thought about what would happen if I couldn't perform anymore, because I was dealing with extreme fatigue and I was a mess in many ways. And then Byrick Lee came up to me and said, "Hey, do you want to direct?" And I said, "Yeah, I would like that." And she started taking me under her wing. And also bringing me into rooms with her so that I would be back in rehearsals, getting on my feet. And she kind of introduced me to the world of directing. And then I was set to do a few apprenticeships, and then the pandemic happened. And then I realized, I think I need to start producing things and also using my voice to speak up about the Asian hate that was happening. So activism happened, and then now I'm doing a culmination of activism and art, which is we're doing this really exciting thing that Jet knows about. We're doing a Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder with an entirely API cast with other Filipino cast members, Ali Ewalt, who you may know as the first Asian American Christine on Broadway. We also have Carl Joseph Coe, an incredible leading man, and lots of Filipinos also on the production team. And we're doing it as a fundraiser for Stop AAPI Hate. So it's a way for us to try to get more representation in media and stages, and also raise money and amplify a great cause. So, oh, and I'm in it too. I cast myself in one of my dream roles, Sabella. So that's fun. So it's been my journey has led me to wearing many hats and just trying to be as creative as I can. I
Thanks.
think
Thanks so much, Diane. We're excited for you as well. I mean, I love how everybody here on this panel knows each other and they're all friends and they've all worked together and you all support each other. So I'm going to I want Nacho now to tell, he's like the baby in this group, right? I mean, he's the newest kind of addition to the scene. And so maybe he can tell us a bit more about like his own, your struggles to find work. And you were well known here in the Philippines and stage, and you're an excellent actor and a singer and a dancer. You do all that. You're the triple threat. But it hasn't. I think you're a good example of how you're poised for success, and but it takes a long time to get there. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about how that's worked out for you, how that's
Sure.
working out for you.
Sure. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Nacho. I was born in the Philippines. I grew up there, and from a very early age, I really loved to perform. So around 10 years old, I auditioned for Repertory Sound of Music. And from then on, I sort of started acting after school and doing one or two productions with Repertory a year. And I worked with Atlantis as well, and actors. And later on, I decided that I wanted to study theater in college. And I applied to a bunch of different schools in the US, and I got into NYU, which was great. I formed a lot of connections. But one thing I think, coming from the Philippines and moving to the US, I took for granted the culture shock. It was a big adjustment for me, adjusting to being in classes with Americans who are very outspoken, or like being in drama school also, where they're telling you to behave a certain way and let go and not necessarily like, be this nice, put together version of yourself that they expect of you in the Philippines, respectful and polite. At Tish, they were very much, wanting us to express ourselves and not sort of be sorry. Like one of our teachers was telling us to stop saying sorry in her class, which was really difficult for me. But yeah, from Tish, I was lucky enough to book some TV work. And then eventually I did Felix Taro off Broadway, which was really nice for me to work on the first Filipino American off Broadway musical. I was happy I didn't have to go audition for Miss Saigon or King and I. It was nice to do something that felt really personal to me. But yeah, I think I'm lucky in the sense I'm very much early on in my career, and now it's become very popular or trendy, I would say, to have people of color in your productions, and I think that's a positive thing and also a negative thing, because I mean, it's great that a lot of people are getting representation, and we're seeing more different kinds of faces on TV and on stage. But I think sometimes it's not always done in the right way. And that has to do with who's telling the story, and how it's being presented, and who gets to make all these decisions, and I think that's where, like, on a producing end or in the production end, it's nice to have more people of color, because then they get to have a say, as opposed to having a completely white narrative all the time. But I consider myself lucky to be at this stage in my career at this point in time, because I feel like there'll only be more opportunities for me as the years go on.
Thanks. Yeah, we're all rooting for you, Nacho. So
Thank you.
um yeah, you have a long career ahead of you, I think, and more success in store, hopefully. Can I go to Giselle now and kind of maybe synthesize all of this, since you're at the forefront of promoting film arts, right? So I think it would be great to hear from you. And you were also an actress once, and you've kind of shifted gears into helping things happen, helping our stories to get told. So, tell us more about that.
Hi, everybody. I just want to say, wow, what a panel. I know everybody, almost everybody. Victor, Batangueña din ako. My mom was born in Batangas. So I guess my story is a little different. I started film and television in my early teenage years in the Philippines. But, when I turned 21, I knew I wanted to train. So I moved to New York City, went to Lee Strasberg Theater Institute, went to theater school, got an agent right away. I wasn't an American citizen yet, so I didn't have paperwork to work, even though I was represented and I was auditioning. So I made the move to Los Angeles, which I'm the only one in LA. Everyone is in New York. So medyo maaga pa dito. But yeah, by the time I got documents to be legal to work, I got my American citizenship through my husband. I already had two kids, and so I wanted to focus on the kids, and that's why I went back to school. I never graduated high school, guys, kasi nag-aartista ako sa Pilipinas. So when my kids were young, that's when I decided, you know what, I'm going to go back to college. Luckily, I got into UCLA, and then I majored in communications, and I double minored in film, television, digital art, and theater. And what I kept seeing is that, especially in Los Angeles and in Hollywood, is that Filipinos have success stories, but everybody's working in silos. Everyone that has become successful has done so on their own merit. But what did it look like for us to all organize? And this terminology, right? People of color. I have to remind myself that I have white privilege because I'm mestiza, right? And for a long time, acting, trying to audition, I would go in for the part for, the Filipina, and they would say, "Oh, the Latina casting was yesterday." And I would be like, "No, I'm Pinay." So there is not one universal story or one universal look for being a Filipino. And then that's when I realized, after graduating college, I wrote my first short film, and I made all the characters and the story Pinoy. And I realized that there's just such a shortage of Filipino narratives. And the reason for that is because as immigrants, we come to America, and lucky are the kids that are given permission to follow their heart and pursue the arts. But for the regular immigrant family, and hats off to our nurses, right, and our frontliners, right, most of them go to that route. So in discovering the need to advocate for representation, us as Filipinos kasi, we're not the ones to demand, di ba? Hindi tayo nagdidemanda, "Oh, bakit kami? Wala," ganyan. But if nobody advocates for representation of Filipino American stories, which is, I mean, you have to look at the statistics. The Filipino American community is the fastest growing AAPI community in America. And UCLA just did the diversity report, 2021. Until now, only 14% of stories in Hollywood are narratives of people of color. But when you look at that 14%, pati doon, ang hirap kasi, Asian American ba tayo? But we were colonized by the Spaniards. And so there's this identity that's going on. And we really find our identity through arts and culture. And so I just graduated my master's actually this month, to really try to understand how can we advocate and bring more visibility to our kababayans that follow this path towards pursuing the arts. Oh, You guys there?
Sorry. Thanks so much, Giselle. I was just gonna say, quintessential LA girl. You're actually in your car at this very moment. You know. Sorry. Do you want to all unmute and we can just, you know, have a little, yeah. Thank you for telling us all your stories. I just wanted to maybe, you know, ask, we can start a conversation going and maybe ask a few questions. Giselle's disappeared though. At this point, though, I'd like to acknowledge Asian Society is here with us today. Executive Director for Manila Joy Alampay is joining us. And we're presenting this to you in partnership with Asian Society. In fact, we have an ongoing Stop Asian Hate campaign at the moment, which ends this month or next month. And we have a special poster made by one of our best contemporary artist Elmer Berlongan, and it's a poster that he created especially to raise awareness for the anti-Asian racism efforts. So after that great introduction, you know, just members of the audience, please, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box or the Q&A box. I just wanted to ask now, like Clint and Giselle, and you know, you were all, and Diane, and you were all talking about your realizing how important it is to maybe not be anymore, you know, your Asianness or your Filipino-ness not be a token. You know, you don't want to be the token Asian. You want to tell more of our stories. You want to bring more awareness of, you know, Filipinos as part of the vibrant mix of what makes America what it is today, right? How do you do that without affecting your career prospects negatively? Is it because there's a greater responsiveness now towards independent productions? I mean, if you wanted to go like big time, big studio productions, would that work for you or not? I mean, this is a question for all of you, really.
I'll hop in here. I've never really, you know, the thing is that like right now everybody's talking about diversity and everybody's like, because we've had this year of like racial reckoning, you know, but I've never really, for the record, when I got out of grad school at NYU, only people of color would hire me. White people didn't like hire me, right? Because I looked like this. I would go in for like, you know, shows like, oh, you know, and they would look at me like, oh, you know, what do you know about like 18th century France or something like that? You know what I mean? So the sort of solace and refuge that I found were from people of color, particularly Black people. When there wasn't enough work in my own people, like I worked for Mayi, I worked for NAPCO and all those, you know, all these Asian American theater companies here. When there wasn't enough work to go around, particularly for designers, you know, Black folk actually hired me. And the first person who actually hired me was a Black person. His name was George Wolf. He ran the public theater and he said, come over here. You know, there's a home for you over here. So I've never attached my proclivities or my sense of success to white people. Never. And so they sort of figured out like, oh, he's actually, I think, you know, we think he's talented. Like I've seen his work, and you know, and so they hired me on their own accord. I'd never sort of courted that, you know. So I don't when part of what gets me kind of, actually, your question kind of got my goat, because it seems like there is a mutual exclusivity between being truthful about what about social justice and unhireability. And that ought not be, but you're right. Like it does affect, like, you know, it does affect how you're being hired here. But at this point, and I can't speak for everybody on this panel, at this point, I don't really give up, you know. I'm the option, not because I choose to do it, but because it's been shaken out of me. Right. I want to be able to go toe to toe with my white colleagues and say, hey, listen, what you're experiencing is different from what I'm experiencing. right? When I walk to people, when I walk into things, I don't actually experience what you're experiencing. And I think that also goes to sort of like the Philippines' long history of colonization, right? Like darker skinned folks walk into shit in the Philippines and they don't actually experience what mestizas experience, or mestizos experience. So all I'm saying is that it's a real thing, right? And it's a real thing to sort of acknowledge, and it's a real thing. Well, what did I read today? This idea of marginalized, right? Like we should stop using the word marginalized, and we should actually say the historically oppressed, right? Because through history, we share this history with the United States, right? We share this sort of colonial history with the United States, this settler colonial history. People who didn't look like us came over, took over the lands and the resources, and actually used it, right? I think part of what we're asking right now is how do we actually continue with creating art in this capitalist environment, right? And actually also be conscious of social justice. And I actually don't think those two are mutually exclusive. And it goes to this question of hireability, right? I do think that part of being a capitalist society is actually acknowledging that the capital, the original capital that was used in this country was stolen, right? The land was stolen and the labor capital was also stolen, right? And so you have a nation that's built on stolen land, built by stolen people. And so for me, unless we acknowledge that, and then we will just be like, every single area in art making in this country is informed by that, right? And that goes on to the way we see Asian people, we see Latinx people, you know what I mean? And so unless we acknowledge that, we're actually we're participating in a system that pretends to be all right, and it isn't. And within that system, you can be hired and still say what you need to be saying. I don't, I think this, yes, I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but you don't want to be working in that. I'm going to speak for myself. I don't want to be working in that environment anyway, right? I'm going to have to tiptoe and can't say the things that I know is true. You know what I mean? Like, that's not for me. Maybe for other people, but not for me.
Does
I'm
anyone
going to
want to
chime
jump
in
in?
here.
Yeah.
I'm going to chime in here. I 100% agree with Clint. Every heartbeat of that. I mean, and perhaps one of the best decisions George Wolfe made was providing you with an artistic home, which is fantastic. I was motivated and compelled by for the very same reasons and causes. However, I took a slightly different path. Yes, I felt like there wasn't room for me. I didn't have a white mentor. I was not going to succumb to that kind of institution. So I decided to take it upon myself and built my own world. A really great, talented Filipino comedian called Alec Mapa, I heard him say, there was no room for me at that table. I spent so much time seeking a space at that table. I then learned to create my own table and invite people to come in. So I was really, really inspired by that. So I started my theater company. It's hard, because you have to go with your conviction, your inspiration. You have to raise money for it, build a theater community, at the same time learn about craft, because we are such a small percentage of the working population, of the working professionals. We have to be 5 times as good to be recognized, to be acknowledged. White mediocrity is so rampant, but for people of color, for people like us, we have to be 5, 10 times better to be even acknowledged or to be invited. So I decided, I was not going to participate in that. So, I worked hard for 10 years, raising money and building a community of artists and theater makers. And I'll never forget this. This was like 2 years ago, and I started my grad school, my postgraduate course. My first big project was a notional project. And we were given a list of plays from which we have to create a world as a director. 10 were plays written by white people, the usual plays, the predictables. 2 were by black playwrights. There was 0 representation for Asians. I saw that list and I said, this is not acceptable. And that was like week 1, day 5. I marched up to the office of the headmaster and I said, this list is not acceptable. Where is David Henry Hwang? Where's Che Yu? There's a list of Jessica Hagedorn, Linda Fagao Hall, list of Asian American playwrights, Asians, that is not being included in a largely white roster. So, by the following year, that list had been revised. So that was my little contribution to a systemic issue. And when I was interviewing for this job at the Old Vic, I knew I was up against white British directors. And I had to be loud, I'm sorry. And I had to also, there was like this mining of your ideas. And then I had to be very, very clear to say, if you want more of my ideas, you're gonna have to hire me. And then there was this issue of gender and all that stuff, but that's for another panel that I had to fight for. But thankfully, it was acknowledged and it was recognized. So yeah, my 2 cents.
Throwing in an actor's perspective here. Oh, I'm sorry, Giselle, do you want to go?
Please, Diane, go. I was going to talk about your unapologetically Asian hashtag, right? So please take it away.
Appreciating you. Thank you. Yeah, speaking as an actor, a couple years ago during The King and I started a small platform on Facebook and Instagram called Broadway Diversity Project. And therein was where we just shouted out any instance where there was a non-traditional, so to speak, casting in order to kind of encourage casting directors and companies to kind of reward their good behavior when they did something that was out of the box. And it grew quite large because that's what people wanted to see. We were kind of tired of not being, to be relegated to like, there's, in every Broadway show, you always look for, back in the day, there's always one black boy, one black girl, one Asian boy, one Asian girl dancer in the ensemble. And those are the people you looked for. They were never the people on the poster. They're never the leads. They may be playing your sassy friend, but, the numbers are still abysmal. There is a group called APAC who's doing the amazing work of compiling the actual numbers of who is on Broadway. That way it's irrefutable evidence of, okay, no, it's not our feelings that were being kind of erased from media here. It's actually happening. So, I created Broadway Diversity Project just to kind of get to make myself feel better, to kind of give me hope every time I saw somebody else on the poster of something. Because I did, to answer somebody's question in the chat, I definitely wanted to quit. I think during King and I, it was like I was just there bowing on stage. Granted, I was at Lincoln Center. Great. It should have been an amazing honor. And not everybody feels this way, and I don't speak for everybody. But for me, I was like, I've been here 20 years, and this is it for me. This is it. I believe in my talent. I believe in my training. I have so much to say. I have a lot to give. And I had believed at that point, this is right before Hamilton came out, that I was like, this is it. I'm only ever going to do King and I and be bowing here in the back, not making eye contact, not really anybody could do this job. And it was a disappointing time. But, like Clint said, like Victor said, things are changing. Things are really changing.
That's great. That's great. I mean, maybe incremental to start with, but at least things are moving, right? Jet, sorry, did you want to say something?
Yes. Just to add to, because I'm on the business side. So how do I get rid of my hand? Okay. Um, I'm on the business side, right? So it's a struggle for me because I founded myself on white money. No, I have to admit that, and that was about $5 or $6 million. All throughout the 18 shows that I produced, and but then again, when I ventured out into, again, from my documentary, that was my own money, to lingua franca, I changed already my trajectory without, before even George Floyd, before this racial awakening that we've experienced for the past 16 months. What I'm trying to concentrate on now is bringing the Asian money. So that's where I'm focusing on. It's because I know our white counterparts are gracious enough to acknowledge, the privilege they have enriched themselves for centuries. Okay, and I appreciated that, especially with my colleagues, because after George Floyd, I actually spoke up. I emailed a lot of my colleagues in the producing team about my representation, and I said this has to stop. And I've passed on all since the Broadway offers has been brought to me, because I couldn't take it anymore. So now I'm focusing on, again, from the business side, and trying to find that Asian money to bring in, because as far as I'm concerned, no one else will give light to our stories but ourselves. That also comes with equity. We got to bring in the equity. That's just my 2 cents in this subject.
Can I just
Just
say,
how? Sure.
piggybacking off of everybody, uh, what the most important thing about everything is this, right? It's the dollar. So to show that our stories, our narratives are valuable, we need to support our own. In fact, we need to double down, triple down. What, just like, okay, for example, big example, Joe Coy. Steven Spielberg saw the power of Joe Coy because all the all the shows that he does are packed to the brim, and not necessarily just all Filipinos, right? And so I think it will open up if people see the value and the power of our dollars that go to support our stories. And I do have to, I love what Clint said about, stop saying historically marginalized, right? Historically oppressed. And your original question was, how do we not get blacklisted if we say something? Essentially, because in Manila, if you complain, oh, why isn't this cast or this, you will get blacklisted. But here, I mean, there are antitrust laws against that, right? So I think it's a matter of training and being prepared. So when that opportunity comes, just like for all of us here that have been able to sort of, get a shot at what we love to do, we have to be so primed. So when it's our turn, we can use our collective voice to demand that we be given a platform. So I'm sorry, I got a little heated there.
No, but as it should be, right? Victor, I just have a slight question for you. You went into European literature, right? Was that was like a conscious choice, because it's also written by white people, right? So, are you finding the universal resonance in them and hoping to bring them to a wider audience?
Well, I've done Asian dramatic literature, and part of this was more of a personal development to explore
Mhm.
and mine the universality of the human condition through the works of Shakespeare and the Jacobean writers. Um, what is missing in content and expression is whether it is written by white people. For example, the play Proof. Why can't that be an Asian family? Why is it always the first basis, the first stop, casting a white audience? Obviously, and there are probably some financial repercussions, but for me, I look at dramatic literature as first and foremost as an examination of the human condition. As an actor, as a theater director, that is my job, to explore, to investigate the humanity. I am a Filipino at heart. I filter my work through my Filipino blood and soul, and all of the conditioning forces and the training that I've been incredibly fortunate enough to have embraced and immersed myself in. But yes, and I continue to explore a wide range of dramatic literature from my own people to other cultural aspects as well. And if you haven't noticed, there have been not only an exciting racial regurgitation of Shakespeare casting, but also gender. Female King Lear, which is incredibly exciting, which is great. So, yeah.
There's a question
Can I
just
just say,
came in. Oh, go ahead, Clint.
can I just, part of what I love that question, because it's very provocative, right? Like, so like, if we are kind of like, if we as people of color, if we're Asian Americans or Filipinos, are really about like going into our roots and really about like BIPOC advocacy, then why the proclivity to white work, right? And I would just pose that white people have been profiting from our trauma for centuries. It is not, to me, it is not out of the question that we profit from theirs. We have a claim over their stories as well. You know what I mean? And so I think part of, I think what we need to understand is that in order for us not to be siloed, we also have to actually calibrate what access we have to other work that we don't necessarily, quote unquote, own. Right. And in a way, sort of really parse as artists what really is cultural appropriation or just culture, and how we, particularly as Filipinos, right, a very mongrelized culture, actually have claim over a lot of stories, and I just want to sort of like really think about, like, I love your question because it really provokes a lot of thought, right? Like, because like, I think the easy way out is to just say, oh, then you should just do that kind of work. We should just do this kind of work and this kind of work, right?
Exactly.
And I think part of, and this goes back to what Jet was talking about in terms of money, right? And, I think what folks don't understand is that people of color actually have money. The amount of charitable giving that Black people actually do is actually more than white people. But the difference is they give to institutions and organizations that actually promote community building, right? So if we think of the arts, movies, theater as vehicles, as to actually create community, right? Then we will get our own people to actually invest in them. Right now, the arts is a separate thing. We have succumbed to what had been a systemic kind of programming to look at the arts as an elitist thing, something to aspire towards. Right? It's something that actually doesn't create community, something that's high above there. We need to like the arts is almost like a pair of Gucci shoes. You know what I mean? And so entitlement comes into play. All of this, and it positions us, because we as people of color, as particularly as Filipinos, like we haven't even talked about sort of the diaspora of Asian Americans, right? And where we fall in that. But we are positioned in a way that we need to look at that. We are systemically programmed to look at that as something that we can't achieve, right? And so unless we actually change the way we think, and it's really a psychological thing, right? Like mostly as a sociological reprogramming in our own sort of DNA, like that, we have claim to that. That is actually ours too.
No, I mean, you raised some really great points. Agree. Sorry, I didn't mean to provoke like extreme reaction to my question.
No, please provoke. I mean, girl, listen, you have me. It's nighttime here in New York City, and you better provoke me, because otherwise I'm gonna fall asleep.
And also, I mean, why not? Why not? Why can't we? Like as Clint was just saying, I mean, we have imagination, we have curiosities. We can build a world. I can I would love to do a Hamlet that is, with the background of like the Marcos administration during the people power. Why not? That
That would be
is,
brilliant. Yeah, that would
I
be
want to
brilliant.
see this, Victor. I want to see it.
Let's
what I mean.
do it.
I would love to explore the gay relation between Hamlet and Horatio. Why not put that out there? You know what I mean? So why not?
Do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Jet, you have
Can
to
I
find the
just-
money for it.
Bambina, can I just say a
Sure,
challenge
go ahead.
also, a challenge to our attendees and to our community is, what does it look like for just what Clint said, right? Arts and culture bring us together, and yet supporting the art because it's so close to us as Filipinos, diba? It's part of our culture. We're always singing, we're always dancing. And yet, when it comes to supporting artists, when it comes to providing them a platform, we have a lot of Filipinos that are that are doing very well. What does it look like for them to, when they think about philanthropy, the Filipino will always think of the 3 R's. First R, relief. Ay, may bagyo sa Pilipinas, magpadala tayo ng pera dyan, di ba? The second R, religion. We're at church, I'm gonna give money. I'm gonna make sure some people see me give money. The third R is like region, the Batangas Association, the Ilocano Association. What does it look like to give money to theatrical companies such as Victor's or, Felix Taro? Like, we need to show up for our own by not asking for discounts, because I hear it too often where the Filipino is like, may discount ba dyan? Please put your money where your mouth is. Support Filipino artists.
That's very true.
Yes, come on with the
Totoo,
truth.
diba? Totoo.
Yes, mayroon ba kayong kilala dun sa ganyan-ganyan? Di ba? Mga ganyan mga talkies.
Pero naka-Gucci bag, naka-Louis Vuitton.
Yes.
I want to go a little lighter now. I just wanted to ask, someone saying here, Victor, your camera quality is impeccable. What are you using right now? The way you're coming out. I mean, this is a craft question, right?
Is that for real? Well, I did so much. I did so much digital theater last year. So this is a Canon EOS mirrorless camera.
Okay.
And 3-point lighting and a snowball microphone. There's my setup.
Okay. Nacho, I want to ask you a few questions. Well, I have some questions coming in on WhatsApp. When you took the role for Rise, when you auditioned, what was the brief for it? Did they say Filipino, or was it kind of?
Oh, actually, that was an issue. The role was originally Latino. Well, I guess the role was Latino, and the casting director actually sent me an email and asked if I was Latino, and I said I just lied, and I said, well, I'm part Spanish and part Filipino, so I would consider myself Latino. Thank you. And I guess that was good enough for them, because I got cast. But no, it wasn't Filipino.
But there was a future episode planned, right? I remember you saying with your backstory that never quite happened, right? Was it?
No. I you must have misheard. That wasn't
okay.
a thing. Yeah.
But what advice would you? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
So just going back to that idea of
we're so Filipino, we're saying sorry every second we can. So
yeah, there my teacher will get upset. No, what's this called? A lot of the roles I auditioned for are actually Latino, and because I mean I've only auditioned for Filipino roles maybe 2 or 3 times, just because there haven't been a lot of breakdowns or auditions for it. Although recently, I would say in the last 6 months, I've had 2 or 3, which is majority of it. So I'm hoping that as time goes on, there'll be more. But I think, like, talking about what G said, when she would go into auditions and she's mestiza, people would say, oh, the Latina audition was the other day. There is that thing of, like, Filipinos, are very mixed, and there's a big spectrum of what it means to look Filipino. Not everyone. There are Chinese Filipinos, there's Spanish Filipinos, then you have, mixed Filipinos with there are many different. Another guy on Rise was half Filipino, but he was also half black. So he was actually cast as a black character. And I said it was funny how they have a Latino guy, a Latino character and a black character, and they're both half Pinoy. But it's, I guess on in the arts, a lot of it is visual, right? It's perception, and people's perceptions are all different. So sometimes you can be one thing but be perceived another way.
What about predatory behavior in the industry? I mean, I'm sure, Giselle, in the Philippine industry, like movie industry, you hear a lot of talk. I mean, about the casting couch, so to speak, and all that. And,
Me too,
does it happen in the US? Yeah, me too,
Yes.
exactly. And it's not just male, it's not just, let's say, the male, producer, director, whatever, and the struggling actress. It's also, same sex, right? I mean, from what we've heard. So do you face those things as well in the US?
Hashtag me too. Absolutely. I'm sure not just for me, but for everyone. And I feel that's really where you see that the culture change, right? When systemic oppression about what it means to be able to talk about it. Like, a couple years ago, we couldn't talk about this. It was just something that happened that we just had to contend with, right? Of course, that's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened today. Like, it happens a lot, and not just to women, but that's the power of when culture, like systemic oppression and culture changes, right? And so that's what we're hoping will happen also for representation. So tying that back to sort of this discussion is like, because there was a movement of Me Too where people could talk about it without shame, right? Then it becomes part of culture where it's not acceptable. And so now this whole reckoning of understanding that it benefits everybody when you have all people of color being represented. And so I think it's important for us to think about allyship and also microaggressions. Let's face it, Filipinos are some of the most racist people I know, right? My mom is, I mean, it's part of, oy, dami mo kinain, ang taba mo. It's something that we need to shed, these microaggressions. And I love what Clint said about, who gave him that opportunity were the African American community, right? So we need to understand that our struggle to be represented is built off of their struggle, because they made it happen for a lot of the Filipinos in the 60s, right? Because they demanded equality, and because of that, we benefit. And so we need to really unearth the systems in which we think of oppression and representation. And like I said, I have to acknowledge na may white privilege ako, di ba? Kasi half white ako. But that's why I want to be able to use my voice to be able to advocate for all Filipinos, no matter if they're mixed, if they're Filipino or not. How can we get more people who are gatekeepers to understand the collective Filipino community will support and put their money towards entities, not just theater, not just film, but all, like movies, TV, when there's a diverse cast, not just Filipinos, right? Because sometimes it's like, oh, he's the first Filipino who did that. How can we just happen to be Filipino, but excel in what we do, not because of the fact? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can
Absolutely.
I say that there's this cultural thing of where when a Filipino does really, really well, we all sort of take ownership over them. Like when Manny Pacquiao does well, it's like, oh, it's because he's Filipino. Or
Pag
like
sikat
I
na.
even saw, yeah, well, or when they're famous. And there's also a little bit of crab mentality where some people, will try to tear another person down instead of just supporting someone. That I think people need to realize that there's enough space for everyone to shine in the sun and not try to think of each other as competition but support one another. Because like for example, Jokoy has a movie coming out, right? And he has another series coming out. I auditioned for it and I didn't get the part, but I'm really excited to watch it and will promote the movie because if that movie does well, then it will open up other jobs for me in the future.
Sure. I have a very specific question that came in from WhatsApp. I think it's directed towards Jet. Just it's related to a big time producer on Broadway, Scott Rudin. Do you have sorry about the sexual harassment claims? We're
Uh,
just
yes,
just um just directed towards you, if you don't mind
yes.
answering.
Oh no, not at all. I worked with Scott in 3 productions. It wasn't sexual harassment. It's an abuse of authority. I actually wrote him on this one, but my last engagement with him was with who's a no a delicate balance with Glenn Close, and after that, because I was hearing all these stories, right, and I just decided to um, identify the flock that I wanted to, because these stories that I've heard, it wasn't my truth to speak of, right? I wasn't there in the room because in this at this time and age, you really have to have evidence, right, and all that. And I've also heard of some actors in some of my shows about the abuse, um, the, the discomfort that was in the production, and I listen, I advise them on what to do, but again, it wasn't my truth to speak of. It wasn't. I don't want to do the platform for them because it's their
Mm-hmm.
truth. They have to say that on record because I can't just accuse on behalf of someone else as colleagues of mine. So yes, that was the reason why I sort of ventured away or from Scott
Mm-hmm.
Rudin and work with different producers. So yes, I hope I answered the question. But no, I'm glad that now Scott has somehow resigned from the Broadway League and gave up his producing rights and all his income from Book of Mormon and To Kill a Mockingbird. That's still a smash hit on Broadway right now. And just to sort of take it in. And I don't know where he's leading to, but I'm glad that there's that sort of admission of guilt if there
Yeah.
was ever. But
Yeah.
I would let those victims to speak themselves because it he didn't do it to me.
Thanks, Jet. I have another question here. I think we have maybe a few more minutes to go. What is your dream role or production to create that is racially blind if they cast or produced it that way? Do you want, I mean, you can all answer.
I have one. Um, actually, two. I every August I usually come to the Philippines too, and when I'm there, I always go to the Virgin Lab Fest. I've actually picked up a musical there and a play that I wanted to bring it here. So I'm incubating that as we speak with the creators there in the Philippines, and I'm trying to change it as a blind casting. So and that's also an answer to that talking about mining Asian theatrical ones, not just Western theatrical traditions. So yes, and these two again were written by Filipinos back because I got them from Virgin Lab Fest, and I love it. So it's still in development. We're still in discussion, but I want to bring them here.
Um, Victor's gone, or it's Clint, or you want to answer that?
First of all, I want to unpack this term racially blind. or color blind casting, I think the sort of term is a consciousness of color, right? Because we are never blind to color. So when we cast somebody of color, whether an Asian person or whatever, we are casting their whole humanity, and that includes their color. So for me, I don't, I want to tell stories. I love Filipino stories. I love that question about like, oh, hey, you're just referencing Western traditions. I would beg to disagree that I think a lot of us, when we go into our practice, like we carry that ancestral wisdom. There is nothing that I do that is not infused with my Filipino-ness. My Filipino-ness is included in every single thing I do, whether that's Here Lies Love, Once on This Island, anything. I cannot separate my being Filipino to the work that I do. So it's not really that black and white. For me, I'd love to do, I'd love to do sort of like the sort of really dark history of our country and its relationship with the United States. I want to create a piece, or I want to work on a piece that actually deals with the genocide that happened in the Philippines during the turn of the century, by the Americans, and how we created this culture of nurses. That is, to me, a major thing. People sort of like, that is the genocide that happened in the Philippines was the first major genocide that happened in the 20th century, and people are acting like it didn't happen. Close to almost 2 million Filipinos were killed by American soldiers. And so how easy we forgive and how easy we forget, a lot, our smile, our Filipino smile, belies a lot of trauma and pain. And I would love, for some sort of like group of artists or an artist to actually unpack that into something meaningful.
If I could add to that,
project. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting what Clint mentioned, that a lot of Americans don't realize that the Philippines was a colony of the United States, and the only colony of the United States, and to think how much we, like, studying in the Philippines, learn about America and their involvement in our history, and how little they learn about us is quite appalling sometimes. You meet someone and they can't even locate the Philippines on a map. And I've been reading this book. It's called In Our Image, America's Colonization of the Philippines, which has been very eye-opening to me, just to see how much America, like, they established our education system and sort of have created us in their image as little brothers, but not giving us sort of the same opportunities that they did. All the Filipinos who fought in the Korean War, who weren't granted citizenship and promised citizenship but never got it. So it's just always interesting to see how so much is forgotten, and how Filipinos still admire Americans and look up to the US and look for this American dream. It's just interesting to think how that's become almost erased in history.
True. I think, Victor, you wanted to say something about your...
How do you unpack blind casting? Is that the question? Forgive me, I had to go to the bathroom.
It's true though. No, but it's true though. When people say I don't see color, you're actually making a statement that you do see color, right? I've heard that so many times. White people, especially, saying they don't see color, but that's kind of a misnomer, because by saying that, you're basically erasing the other person, right?
That is not, that's untrue. When I am exhausted by all stories being told from the white Anglo perspective, white experience. So every artistic endeavor I do and pursue is not of that lens and that perspective. I'm more curious and interested about, other voices and other perspectives, whether it is a Filipino piece or not. Like what Clint said, in my practice, it is explored and expressed from my Filipino blood and heart and soul. So for me, I'm not interested. I'm more interested in a more dynamic, a more colorful, if I may, storytelling platform and expression, if that even makes sense.
Sure. Okay, I think we have to close now. I mean, can I just ask for, final statements from everyone? Maybe is this a business? If anyone is asking, is this a business that they should, if this is their dream, should they continue to pursue their dreams? And, maybe any words of wisdom and maybe about being true to yourself and who you are as Filipinos in an industry that likes to typecast everybody.
I'll start. I've been asked to teach at drama schools, universities, and teach acting and scene study in Stanislavski. And there is this form of Q&A, and they ask the same question, and I always tell them that if you have other interest and passion, pursue that. Because an artist's life is not easy. You have to absolutely love it. Every so often, I have to go through a process of self-examination. But my answer is always, I can't see myself doing another thing, and I am willing to sacrifice. And so if there's something else you can do that. Otherwise, be curious, stay true to yourself, have immense imagination, and be an amazing listener, and be kind.
Great. Who wants to go next?
Can I say goodbye?
Giselle?
I'm
I
sorry.
thought that was beautiful.
I gotta go, so I just want to say goodbye to everybody. Sorry. I just want to say that continue to build with people that you have affinity with. I just want to introduce you guys to my good friend, Jose.
Kamusta? Sorry to bother you guys. Go ahead.
So continue to build, and I just want to say thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to share our stories with everyone, and I can't wait to meet everybody after this pandemic, okay?
Great. Thanks, Giselle. Thanks for driving all throughout and joining us even from your car. So who wants to go next? I think Diane has to go quickly soon. So
yeah, unfortunately, I have to go too, but this has been a really wonderful time. And I just want to say thank you to everybody here on this panel for all the inspiration you've given me and the community you've given all of us, the opportunities you've all created. I've learned so much from each of you. And also to everyone watching, to be unafraid and unapologetic in speaking the truth as needed. We need your voices more than ever. So thank you. And I hope you come see us. Collaboration. We're also raising money for Stop API Hate. It's collaboration.com. I put it in the chat.
Thanks. Okay. Nacho, you want to say something?
I agree with Victor where he said that if you want to go into this industry, you really have to love it. Otherwise, it's not the industry for you. There's a lot of ups and downs, and I think if you're meant to be in it, you will be in it. And if not, then you'll go on to something else where you're meant to be. I definitely spent a lot of time thinking about whether or not this is the industry for me, and I think time will tell. But for right now, I'm happy with where I am, and I will just continue to keep working hard.
Great, thanks. Jet?
Yes, yeah, a lot of great stuff have been said already, but to piggyback on everyone, giving up is never an option for me, especially on the business side. That that production will come, that breakthrough will come. Just stay focused, stay in your lane, and always remember that our individual path is an individual's journey. Never compare yourself to someone else in the industry because they have their own path. Never entertain jealousy, but always be grateful on the great things that happen to others in the community, and never forget your roots.
Great. And Clint, do you want to sum it all up for us?
Yeah, no, ditto to what everybody said. I think, for me, I think if you are really interested in creating work in the entertainment industry, you should really fall in love with storytelling. And that's sort of the key. I don't know anything else. You know what I mean? This is the only thing I know how to do. And so it wasn't really about, for me, it wasn't about making a lot of money, being so rich. It's just because I really wanted to do this. And it was, and it's something that I had to do. It was something that I had to express, And I think the most important thing is not to lose your way, not to lose yourself, just always center it to what is important to you, what you really believe in, what is true and just in your world. And I think you'll have a great time. It has to be fun and it has to really move you that way,
Thank you. I think that was a wonderful discussion we had today. I want to thank you all for your passion and your determination, and also for for being out there and pushing to tell our stories. I think I'd like to just thank all our panelists for joining us today. Again, this will be up on the YouTube website. We have a lot of other members who aren't able to catch it right now, who always tune into YouTube to catch the webinar. I have Joy Alampay here, Executive Director of Asian Society, our partner for today. She's just going to close up, give a few closing remarks for to close today's panel. Joy?
Yes.
Oops, hang on.
Oops.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, okay. Thank you to everyone who has joined us, Jet, Victor, Nacho, Clint, and of course, Giselle and Diane. I just like to say Asia Society has 5 centers in the United States. We're very supportive of AEPI's work, and especially the Philippine Center for all our kababayans there. Do reach out to us if we can do anything for you and your causes, especially our friends who are producers, who are actors in the entertainment industry. We are one with you. Just reach out to us. And of course, Manila House and Bambina, thank you again for having us. And mabuhay po kayong lahat.
Thank you. It's been an absolute honor to have all of you here. And for the New Yorkers, please have it's I guess it's bedtime for you. So thank you for sharing your evening with us. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again for the next webinar. Bye.
Bye. Salamat. Bye.
Bye. Salamat.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.